Thanks for joining us on This Week in Agribusiness. Max, this time of year we've got all this equipment coming out of the fields, and one of the things that everybody notices is that our stock quality, the composition of the stock in the field is stronger than ever thanks to BT corn, and that can do some damage to some tires.
Yeah, you know, the folks at Firestone Ag say this is a good time, not just to clean up the machinery to put it away, but to check the tires to make sure there isn't any damage there ahead of the season when you need the equipment next year. I visited with Brad Harris about that. He's with Firestone Ag. In fact, he also farms, and he shared with me some insight.
As we're getting ready to put our equipment away for the winter, let's make sure that we're inspecting the tires themselves on that piece of equipment. Just trying to figure out, should we be planning purchases for 2022. So with the Firestone Ag, we've got a 7-step checklist on our website with a video to show growers what to look for on the tires. Let's see if we've got enough tread depth as we go into 2022, or if we've got stubble damage and if we should replace those product before we get into the planting season. Just like everything else, demand is strong right now for ag tires, and if customers are used to 3 years ago when you could go into any store and they'd have plenty of product available, we're on a very tight supply right now, Max, and we're encouraging customers to get those orders in early so that as we get into planting season, we're not waiting for product to show up.
As we clean up the equipment, put it away in the shed for the winter time, is there guidance to the grower also about checking inflation? How much does tire inflation matter when it's stored in the winter?
Right, so when we're putting equipment away, I always encourage customers to make sure that we've got plenty of inflation pressure into those tires as we're storing it. I encourage customers to set it more at the max inflation pressure. Just over time, a tire will naturally lose air. It's not 100% impervious to losing inflation pressure. So we don't want to put something away with minimum inflation pressure and then come back to it 3 months later and find that we have a flat on that tire. All that does is cause cussing. People get mad at each other. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So let's inflate those tires up to the max inflation pressure. That way when we come back into it, to pull that thing out, whatever it is, we've got plenty of inflation pressure to move it to the shop to do that final inspection.
What happens to a tire when it does go down? Does it weaken the integrity of the tire itself?
If the tire just goes flat and we're not moving it, it typically doesn't cause any damage to that product. The damage comes if we see it's flat and we decide, oh, I think I can move this 5 feet away from the wall so I can get an air line on it. Moving it that short amount of distance does cause damage to that product. So that's why we want to make sure that when we put it away, we can get to all those transport tires easily, so if we do get low inflation pressure, we can air it up and not do damage to that tire.
Is there anything else on that guideline that you haven't addressed, that list of guidelines that you might share?
As we go into winterizing for our cattle operations, our livestock operations, and we're using these front-end loaders on tractors to move bales around the farm. For our northern climates, when we get frozen ground conditions, let's try to stay away from those ruts that we made when it was a little muddy, because what happens now is those ruts become like boulders, and if we're driving over that with that full bale on the front, we could do impact damage to those tires. And then we've got hungry cows and or any type of livestock, and we can't move the tractor because we've got a flat tire. So just doing some precautions as we're using those pieces of equipment through the winter months to make sure that we're not abusing the tires unnecessarily.
Some of the forecasters have said we might have one of those good old-fashioned winters from the standpoint of extreme temperatures, and that could really put things to the test, couldn't it? Equipment and tires, I suppose.
That's correct. That's correct. So just make sure that we've got the proper inflation pressure in those tires as we go out. And remember, when we get huge temperature swings, so if, in my area in northern Ohio, we can go 71 days and 30 degrees the next day. That natural temperature swing will cause the tire to lose air just through physics. So when we go from warm to cold, that's when it becomes real critical that we go out and actually check our inflation pressure to make sure we've got enough air in there to carry the load.
We appreciated the guidance there from Brad Harris, and he does know what he's talking about indeed. He's a grain and hay producer.
So he knows
New
what
London,
it's
Ohio.
New London, Ohio. So he knows what it's like to have downtime in the field.
Well, and they've quantified this. At Firestone Ag, they have what is called the downtime calculation estimate, and it's $681 an hour. Think about that.
Wow.
That's what it would cost the producer. In terms of the lost time, $681 an hour. That's up 20% from the last time it was calculated in 2017.
And I believe that figure, given the input costs we've got and the commodity prices, that figure is going to be even higher in 2022. And I noticed Brad said, be proactive if you feel like you're going to be needing tires. Because I imagine in the manufacturing business, they're struggling to keep up just like everybody else.
Yeah, like everything else, there are those delays.